here this evening to mainly to mark the anniversary of the trial of Chelsea Manning. He's obviously in jail for a very long time for doing something very brave and right. And it's a terrible thing about the United States. I mean, you can tell that I'm English, but Britain's no better. That, you know, brave, courageous, heroic people end up in jail, and the criminals who are running the world seem to avoid going to jail. I think it's very important for us to be marking the miscarriage of justice that trial of Chelsea Manning represented. We at all are very proud to be trying to draw attention to what happened at that trial by publishing this book that is on the table outside, and as a publisher I'm duty bound to urge you to get a copy of. It really is a wonderful book. It's very, very unique. It's a combination of a transcript, an edited transcript of the proceedings of the trial, and wonderful drawings by Clark Stoeckley, who has been a pretty relentless campaigner for Chelsea Manning and was at the trial for its duration and sat in the courtroom and drew what he observed was going on there. And you can see the results of it on these walls. It's actually the first time I've seen these drawings in the original. And I think they're absolutely extraordinary and wonderful. And I'm very, very proud that we were able to gather them together in this book. So this evening we're going to have some readings from little bits of the transcript. I mean, it's not obviously, the book is a very, very condensed version of what happened at the trial. And what we're going to read out tonight is a condensed version of that. I think it'll give you some flavour of what happened a year ago. So we're going to start with Clark. Clark and I all got to know each other because we also publish Julian Assange. We did a book with him called Cypherpunks last year, and we're doing another book with him about Google coming up this year in September. And obviously Julian and Chelsea Manning, Julian was the person that Chelsea sent the Iraq and Afghanistan warlocks to. Pretty closely connected politically, and it was through that I got to know Clark and how we came to be publishing this book. So Clark.
Thank you, Colin. It's a great night to be here. It's great to have the book finally finished. It was a process. The official transcripts were approximately 32,000 pages. I didn't think you'd like to read that, and they don't come with any pictures. So I decided to kind of condense it down a little bit, especially with great help from Max. Max was the editor. Max also helped write some of the segues and exposition, and he was really good at taking a lot of information and kind of really, chopping it down to what was absolutely necessary. And Adam was a great resource for me because when I started kind of putting this together, I put Adam's daily reports up, and I put them next to Nathan. Nathan Fuller's here. Raise your hand. Nathan was writing for the Manning Support Network, and as well as Kevin Gostola. I would put his page up, and then in the fourth quadrant on my computer screen was Alexa O'Brien's transcripts. And then when the trial came around, the Freedom of the Press Foundation had crowdfunded stenographers, and so that's where I get all of my information from you, Kevin, Alex, or Alexa, and Nathan. And so I invite Adam here tonight, just because I wanted you to hear from somebody who was in that press room with me for like 20 months, and a month after I was no longer allowed to be in that press room. For those of you who don't know, I did get kicked out in the last couple of weeks of the trial. I tweeted out the prosecution's hotel address. They didn't like that.
It was an unauthorized leak.
Right. So I didn't know that was closely held information, but it wasn't classified. In fact, the lead prosecutor was kind of bragging about his work to complete strangers, and one of those strangers told me. So, but I wanted to again, let you hear from someone who experienced the press room as a journalist rather than a sketch artist. So tell me, what were some of the most memorable moments covering this case?
One of the most memorable moments was that every day in the press room we would line up we'd have to drive to Fort Meade, which is basically where the NSA is headquarters. So that base, we line up in our cars in a row and we drive in a caravan. And one of my most memorable moments was the day that I happened to be parked in the press line behind Clark Stoeckley. Now, imagine, if you will, a huge truck with the WikiLeaks decal, the emblem, and release. At the time, it said release Bradley Manning. It would be changed to Chelsea today. But that driving through the gate of Fort Meade, and imagine, if you will, the look on the security guards' faces as all heads turned to the decal on Clark's truck, and which is why I am honored and humbled to be standing next to him today and to hear his praise. And I'm glad that it helped to help you put together this fantastic book but only a handful of institutional press gave it wall-to-wall coverage, and yet I feel grateful that my wire had the kind of vision to give it the kind of probing coverage to give the support to be able to do that, and to see so I had a kind of foot in both worlds in that sense.
Yeah, you did.
Seeing how, as you say, citizen journalism, people who had made their way there, who got people like Alexa, who everyone read, because she was getting transcripts out.
Right.
Because it was, as you say, a lot of citizen journalists who were bringing widespread attention to the case. And, as one over there of the activists wearing the truth t-shirts. There's one truth t-shirt in here.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. You were there that day. And what did they tell you? This is never sweet.
Oh, they said different things every day, but they finally acceded to allowing us to wear the shirt.
Right, the first day of the trial in June of last year, very first day, they made everyone turn the truth shirts inside out.
Wow.
And I was the one in the press room who questioned the legal matter expert, why is this being done? And he didn't have a good answer. And the next day it was overturned, but it I think was some of the best symbolism of this trial, because truth was turned inside out. Right?
Yeah.
They didn't want us to see the truth, and
They don't want to see.
And they kind of fell into the trap of making us turn the shirts inside out, so that I can make that picture and push it. But we're kind of running low on time, but thank you very much for coming out. I couldn't have done it without you, Alexa, Nathan, and Kevin. and you guys were not just a good resource, but also good moral support. And I think for a lot of us, the few I know, this trial changed our lives. We're here at like a good kind of break point, but the fact of the matter is this is just the beginning. And the appeal will start early next year. Could start as early as December, but I doubt that. Just seeing how things have. It took 3 years for the actual trial to start. But a lot of the appeal is going to be based off of what happened in the pretrial, and that's what we need to follow. Is the pretrial punishment, the lack of speedy trial, the overclassification, as well as unlawful command influence. And so I know that you'll probably be there, and Nathan and the rest of us will be there to cover the appeal as well. And hopefully there'll be a second edition to the book. But thank you all for coming out tonight. I hope you enjoy the readings. Hope you enjoy the book. It's good to have it done. All right.
Attorney Combs, did you need any assistance getting out of the suicide smock? I did. I was still taking some sleep medication at the time. The smock is strong, so I couldn't get out of it on my own. There was no reasonable way of accessing natural light. I ate every meal inside of my cell. I did not have glasses. I can't see without my glasses. The entire day I sat upright. I was technically allowed to speak to other detainees, but the cells on either side of me were empty, and talking to someone further away would have violated the conversational tone rules. I never had sheets or blankets if I needed toilet paper. Then I would stand up to the front of the door and announce to the observation room, "Request permission to use toilet paper." Sometimes they say they would get it, and then they didn't. Attorney Combs, did you need any assistance getting out of the suicide smock? I did. I was still taking some sleep medication at the time. The smock is strong, so I couldn't get out of it on my own. Copies of his collateral murder video, which is the reason she is in prison now. And as a gift, we brought you all copies of the collateral murder video outside there on the bar. November 20. Attorney David Coombs. This cell that we see in white tape on the courtroom floor, how many hours a day would you be in this cell at Quantico? It was between 21 and 23 hours, sometimes even over 23, as much as 23 and a half hours a day.
I called the public editor at the New York Times and left a message stating I had access to information about Iraq and Afghanistan that I believed was very important. Despite leaving my phone number and personal email address, I never received a reply. I called the public editor at the New York Times and left a message stating I had access to information about Iraq and Afghanistan that I believed was very important. Despite leaving my phone number and personal email address, I never received a reply. After these failed efforts, I ultimately decided to submit the materials to WikiLeaks. Based upon my research, this seemed the best medium within my reach for publishing the information to the world. I considered my options one more time. I thought that the right thing to do was to release the SIGACs. I visited the WikiLeaks website, followed the prompts, and sent the compressed data files of Sydney I for Iraq and Sydney A for Afghanistan through Tor, software which routes internet traffic through a network of servers and other Tor clients in order to conceal the user's location and identity. I left the SD card and a camera in my aunt's house in the event I needed it again in the future. Video depicting several individuals being engaged by an aerial weapons team. I wanted to learn what happened and whether there is any background to the events. I found several news accounts reporting 2 Reuters employees were killed during the engagement. Reuters had requested a copy of the video under the Freedom of Information Act to understand what had happened and to improve their safety practices for combat zones. They believed there was a compelling need for the immediate release of the video. Central Command told Reuters the video might no longer exist. It was clear to me that the event happened because the aerial weapons team mistakenly identified Reuters employees as a potential threat, and that people in the van were merely attempting to assist the wounded. Within minutes, the aerial weapons team crew learns that children were in the van. They exhibit no remorse. Later, in a particularly disturbing manner, the aerial weapons team verbalizes enjoyment at the sight of one of the U.S. military ground vehicles driving over a body, one of the bodies. The most alarming aspect of the video, however, was the seemingly delightful bloodlust of the crew. At one point in the video, a seriously wounded individual on the ground is attempting to crawl to safety. Instead of calling for medical attention to the location, one of the crew members asks out loud for the wounded person to pick up a weapon so that he can have a reason to engage. For me, this seems similar to a child torturing ants with a magnifying glass.
Manning continued to describe the event. For me, it's all a big mess, and I'm left wondering what these things mean. It burdens me emotionally. I plan on providing this video to Reuters to assist them in preventing events such as this in the future. Another story I found, written a year later, explained Reuters still had not received a formal response in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. After releasing the video, I was concerned about how it would be received. I wanted the American public to know that not everyone in Iraq and Afghanistan are targets to neutralize, but rather people struggling to live in the pressure cooker environment of what we call asymmetric warfare. As I had hoped, others were just as troubled as me, if not more so, by what they saw. I began seeing reports claiming that the Department of Defense could not confirm the video's authenticity. Around this time, I burned the second CDRW containing the video. I placed a classification sticker and wrote Reuters FOIA request on the face. I placed the CDRW in one of my personal CD cases. I planned on mailing it to Reuters after I redeployed, so they could have a copy that was unquestionably authentic. At the same time, I began sifting through information from Joint Task Force Guantanamo, Cuba. As I digested the information, I found the detainee assessment briefs. I have always been interested in the moral efficacy of our actions there. On the one hand, I've always understood the need to detain and interrogate individuals who might wish to harm the United States and our allies. Yet, it seemed that we had found ourselves holding indefinitely an increasing number of individuals that we believed or knew to be innocent. Low-level foot soldiers that would not have been that did not have useful intelligence and would be released if they were held in theater. I also recall President Barack Obama stated that he would close Guantanamo and that the facility diminished our moral authority. After familiarizing myself with the detainee assessment briefs, I agree. I assessed that they were intended to provide very general background information on each of the detainees and not a detailed assessment, and thus not very important from either an intelligence or a national security standpoint. So with my insatiable interest in geopolitics, I became fascinated with the diplomatic cables published on the Department of State's net-centric diplomacy server. I read not only the cables on Iraq, but also about countries and events I found interesting. I thought these cables were a prime example of a need for a more open diplomacy. Given the fact that most of the cables were unclassified, I believe I believed that the public release of these cables would not damage the United States. I did believe, however, that the cables might be embarrassing, since they represent very honest opinions and statements behind the backs of other nations and organizations. No one at WikiLeaks ever pressured me into giving more information.
Being connected to other people, that we have a duty to each other as humans. What a great thing for a young man to feel. That is not anti-patriotic. That is not anti-American. What was his motive? Nowhere does he discuss, I know the enemy is going to get this. He's solely concentrated on making a difference, changing the way the world operates. In the deployed environment, the only way you can do your job is to read this intelligence disengaged. But he's troubled by what he sees. These are real people dying. Targets. That's how you talk about people in order not to be concerned that you are killing them. Certainly you could view that video from the standpoint of the Apache crew engaging an enemy. You can also view that from the standpoint of a young person looking at what we now know to be the truth. Two reporters just standing in a group on a street corner, shot like fish in a barrel. What do you do when you can't disengage? What do you do when these images are burned into your mind? When the court looks at this, the defense requests that you not disengage. Did they all deserve to die? That is what Manning is seeing and questioning. Now, the government story has the logic of a child. There's no sophistication there, just taking facts and running with them. The 2009 WikiLeaks Most Wanted list, the government tried to make this an evil thing, but it was WikiLeaks saying, tell us, humanitarians, activists, fellow reporters, what in your country is being hidden that you believe the public should know. We are going to work to obtain it. What does this sound like? Journalism. The amount of the documents in this case actually is the best evidence that Manning was discreet in what he chose. If he were systematically harvesting, we would be talking about millions of documents. But the emperor has no clothes. Manning chose items that we should know, but would not cause damage to the United States. Certainly there are secrets that could gravely impact our country. Manning had access to those, but did not leak them. This too speaks to Manning's selectivity. If the army didn't know that the enemy went to WikiLeaks, how could Manning have known? Then the government argues we must presume that the enemy would go to any source on the internet to find information. This is a negligence argument. In Manning's instance, giving something to a legitimate news organization is the way we hold our government accountable. He never discussed wanting to get information to the enemy. All the forensics prove his motive was to spark reforms. He did not have a general evil intent.
And my name is Melissa Grant. I'm a journalist. I attended the Manning trial as a spectator. I got to go through the security line, have all of everything in my bag opened up, all of my pens clicked and unclicked to make sure I didn't have anything illicit with me. And this is the day that I was there when this photo became known to the world. And I just want to say a few things about this illustration of this photo that I don't think moved with the photo as the photo came out of the world. And one of the things that made me want to attend the trial in person is the lack of a visual record of it. Knowing that there were just a handful of journalists who were there every day trying to make it real to me. And that's why I wanted to go there myself. And when this image was shown in the courtroom, it was a very different experience of seeing it in real life with Manning present than the way it was presented in the press after the fact. This was, tagged in the press as an Army document, which it was entered into evidence in this trial. So if you and the press are going to print it, you say it's courtesy of the military. But it got spun in a way as if the military was somehow trying to smear Manning, to say that here is Manning and what they described as drag. And this actually, in the context of the trial, was an image that Manning took of herself, selfie. Atkins. I really didn't think at the time that having a picture floating around of one of my soldiers in drag was in the best interests of the intel mission. I thought that was being handled by his therapist. And what was going on here in the sentencing, I think, was Coombs trying to separate these issues, saying that there was something that Manning was going through around sexuality and gender, and there was also Manning's mission to bring these documents to light, and there was this breakdown going on within the unit, and we couldn't conflate all of those as the same thing. Worsley says, Manning was having issues at work and explained the outburst. He brought up in therapy this issue of identity, questioning how could he be himself. Being deployed is very isolating. Being an intel person working with top secret clearance is even more isolating. Being in the military and having a gender identity issue do not exactly go hand in hand. It further serves to isolate. Manning finally felt much more comfortable just having it out, but there would never be a time that Manning would be able to be openly female in the military. And then Manning spoke. In one of the rare moments when Manning speaks at length in court, he reads an apology. I'm sorry that my actions hurt people. I'm sorry that it hurt the United States. At the time of my decisions, as you know, I was dealing with a lot of issues that are ongoing and they're continuing to affect me. Although they've caused me considerable difficulty in my life, these issues are not an excuse for my actions. I understand what I was doing and the decisions I made. I did not truly appreciate the broader effects of my actions. Those effects are clear to me now through both self-reflection during my confinement and through the merits of sentencing testimony I've seen here. When I made these decisions, I believed I was going to help people, not hurt them. In retrospect, I should have worked more aggressively inside the system. But I can only go forward. Before I can do that, I understand I must pay a price for my decisions. I hope to one day live in a manner that I haven't been able to in the past. I want to go to college, to get a degree, have a meaningful relationship with my sister, my sister's family, my family. I hope you can give me the opportunity to prove, not through words, but through conduct, that I'm a good person, and that I can return to a productive place in society.
Yeah, it just is very perplexing to me, like, why he took on all the guilt that he took on. What was that all about? It seemed to me like his defense lawyer didn't advise him correctly, but I'd like to hear, because I'm just reading it in newspaper accounts.
I think that if I had experienced the trial from reading it, I might agree with you. One of the things that I feel wasn't conveyed was Coombs' strategy. I feel that Coombs was actually very keen on how and when anything happened. We saw, if you Google naked plea, all of the results are going to be Bradley or Chelsea Manning. This was a kind of strategy that has never been really seen before in any court. But it really is shows Manning's character. Manning was not there to lie to them. Manning was not there to get around what the actions were. Manning was there to bravely accept full responsibility and to not beat around the bush, but to really tell the truth. Manning was a truth teller, and at that Providence inquiry, for 70 minutes, sat there and we heard the most truth that we'd ever heard in that courtroom. Coombs described that at the post-sentencing press conference as kind of an olive branch to the prosecution, to show the judge that they were willing to compromise, to negotiate, to accept some responsibility, and to kind of prove the fact that the prosecution wasn't. The prosecution was there to get life. They wanted the most maximum penalty possible, and it was and there was no conversation about it for them.
It does seem really important to acknowledge, off of your question as well, this was a military trial. This was not a civil courtroom. And the burden of proof was much lighter on the government, and it was a really uphill battle. So just even allowing information to come into the hands of the defense was a huge battle. There was nothing that could be presumed to be the right of the defendant in this case, and you can't imagine how banal this courtroom was. You know.
What sense did you get from the judge? What, just hearing, what was your sense of her?
It could have been worse, I think. I think we could have had a gung-ho military judge. She's, for military lawyers, a little liberal. But I also think that she, and no offense to anyone here, but she was born before the internet and didn't understand it. Didn't understand computers, didn't understand the Computer Fraud Abuse Act. Luckily, she did understand what treason means, and that treason is not when you go to a journalist. And she understood, I firmly believe she understood the implications of finding Manning guilty of the aiding the enemy charge. Yeah.
Didn't it come out in the trial that they didn't even know themselves what was and was not classified?
Yeah.
That it was very
Yeah, especially with the Cloud murder video, they eventually had to concede, well, it wasn't classified, but we're going to say it's closely held, which was this term that wasn't really, had no legal binding. There was no law that said closely held was something you get charged for.
As the laws of war are in fact very muddy. And the consensus view among lawyers is that what happened in that video is awful, but is legal. And I